One of the great supporter of Sanskrit University was the D.K. Shivakumar, current KPCCI president. And his party now takes a completely U-turn. And in fact, we must remember, people tend to forget this, he was honored by a large number of Sanskrit lovers in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavana campus in Bangalore, because of his contribution in making this university facilitation happen.
Namaste, very good evening, and welcome to Citti Media. My name is Citti, and I'm your host for this program. The last 2 days witnessed a trending hashtag that has also seen protests in Karnataka. The hashtag basically said, "Say no to Sanskritam." And this has transcended into a bigger protest on the ground, wherein the politics has seen a strong bifurcation. Now, the Congress party and several regional outfits, including self-proclaimed pro-Kannada groups in Karnataka, have displayed and protested their reasons against an upcoming Sanskrit university in Magadi, which is on the outskirts of Bengaluru. Now, why is this happening? To give more perspective on this, we are joined by MS Chaitra ji. Sir, namaskara. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you are well.
Oh, I'm fine. Namaskara.
So now this entire, with South India, when it comes, there is already a bifurcated debate on regionalism, on language. There is a sense of pride in the languages that we speak here. And so there seems to be a divide from the beginning. Now, the Stop Hindi imposition is something that has been happening for a while, but without going into that, the say no to Sanskritam, why do you think there shouldn't be, or there should be, a Sanskrit university, and why do you think the protests are happening first of all?
No, it's a very important issue, Sharon. I mean, this particular issue, which has created disturbance among large number of people, that whether we should have Sanskrit University in Karnataka or not. And the second, this campaign which says, say no to Sanskrit. Now, is something very peculiar, because it is not that simple as it appears. Because the issue started with this claim that, look, Karnataka has a Kannada university. And Kannada university has not been given adequate grants. And therefore, you are now in the same time when Kannada University is suffering with the financial crisis to manage the university. There was this announcement to allocation of land and construction of university campus near Ramnagara, which is meant for Sanskrit University, which is already in place. Now, though one would not find the relationship between why should there be link between the construction of university in Ramnagara, which is Sanskrit University, and the Kannada University not having grants. I think the issue becomes murkier. To know it little carefully, we need to examine. In this conversation, we do that. Now, first of all, the argument begins like this. Now, Sanskrit University got some amount of money for construction and the lands were given. And Kannada University did not get money. Therefore, we don't want Sanskrit University give money to Kannada University. And what were the arguments saying? That we don't want, now this forest land should not be given to, for example, in the Ramnagar area where forest land has been allocated to the Sanskrit University should not be given. Therefore, we will not let Sanskrit University to come in Ramnagar area. Now, if you look from that point of view, a large number of universities in Karnataka have been built on forest lands. Karnataka state government has given forest lands and they followed due procedures and they have given compensatory lands for building alternative forests. We have never seen, for example, when Kuvempu University was built in the forest land in the, one of the biodiversity hotspots, Western Ghats, or Kitturani Chennamma University in Belgaum, Mangalore University, any number of institutions. The lands in the heart of the Western Ghats have been diverted. We have not seen any Kannada movement coming forward to say don't give the lands. For instance, nobody is opposing another university which is coming in the same Ramnagara district, which is the Health Science University, Rajiv Gandhi Health Science University. So therefore, targeting Sanskrit University raises a question. It is one thing to argue that we need money for Kannada University. That's a different case. But to say that money should not be given to Sanskrit University is not a fair comparison, because now there are any number of such specialized universities like Sanskrit University, there is Music University, there is Gramin, Panchayat Raj and Rural Development University, there is Fishery University, there is Horticulture University. All these universities, when they were built, nobody seemed to have opposed any of this. But there is this case becomes very peculiar that there is this opposition comes to the Sanskrit University alone. Now, it is an entirely different debate whether we should have universities for languages or not. Is an entirely different debate I will not get into. Technically speaking, we should not have this monodiscipline, monofaculty universities, but they have been done. For the last 25 years, there is such a practice. Therefore, I will not venture into that debate. But saying that you need grants for Kannada University is a different case altogether. And why Kannada University is not getting grants? Because there are other issues associated with it anyway. Before going into that, one of the argument is to say that the money that has been given to Sanskrit University comes at the cost of Kannadigas. Now, there is this claim that Sanskrit is being imposed and Kannada being removed because there is a Hindu nationalist party, BJP, which is the ruling party. Now, when a university is being constructed, where they run, BA, MA, PhD, postdoctoral kind of various degree courses there. There is a faculty which runs. I don't know who is imposing on whom. Whomever wants to apply, there is a due process, there is a legal process. If people get admission, they will do whatever is required for the production of knowledge. It is not even the question of marketability, because people who get admission will know whether they get marketing, whether they will have market value or not. Despite that, people come. And they themselves make that nobody wants to come. Now, governments are not very foolish or idiotic to say if nobody is going to come, why would government want to invest on that? That is not the point. Now, second, Sanskrit University, whether government runs it or not, Sanskrita continues to survive. There are private investors who have been investing in it. Now, that is not the point of debate. But now, at this particular point, why there is this peculiar opposition to Sanskrit University is unclear. And second, why once you wanted to say, assume that you wanted to say no to Sanskrita University. Now, why say no to Sanskrita, not to university? You could have added university to the hashtag. You didn't. So there is a larger political game that is being played out in the kind of politics which is there. Second important point we must remember is like any university that gets established. Sanskrit University got established, by the act of the legislation in the Karnataka Assembly. Now the act was passed. And I must remind you, when the act was passed in the debating process, one of the great supporters of Sanskrita University was the D.K. Shivakumar, current the KPCCI president. And his party now takes a completely U-turn. And in fact, we must remember, people tend to forget this, he was honored by a large number of Sanskrit lovers in Bharati Vidya Bhavana campus in Bangalore, right, because of his contribution in making this university facilitation happen. And earlier, there were two vice chancellors who were appointed. Which tenure was this? Who these vice chancellors were appointed? Mallepuram G. Venkatesh was not a Sanskrit scholar, but a very, very big scholar in language. She was appointed as the vice chancellor, first vice chancellor. Padma Shekhar, she was not from Sanskrita, but she was a Jainology and Kannada scholar. She was appointed as the vice chancellor. And who was the ruling dispensation at that time? And why did these people never felt at that point in time to oppose Sanskrit? So therefore, just because I come and say, or some 10 people or maybe 10,000 people come and say, you cannot say no to a university because it has been passed by the legislative process. Now suddenly there is the Kannada groups, which see, because I am an ecologist, I have been following the development of what is happening to the ecology. Suddenly the Kannada organizations, because there is a Sanskrit university, there is love for forest has come. As I pointed out earlier, on so many forest lands, universities and so many institutions have been built. And I have never seen any of these groups and any of these activists coming and opposing. And we, including myself, many of us, both legally and otherwise, we have been fighting to save whatever remaining forest lands. And none of these people were even sympathetic to the concerns that people like me and many others were leading at that point in time. We negotiated with governments, tried to save forest lands, etc. And nobody was there. So therefore, neither the argument of forest land being eroded by allocating land near Ramnagara is legitimate in this case. Nor it is the case that Sanskrit University is something that BJP government just now got up and passed. I mean, it was passed as an act of legislation. And then BJP government was also there. Later, Congress government was also there. They recruited faculty. They appointed the vice chancellors and registrars, etc. The whole process has been happening. What has been now done as a part of it, once the university is run, see, Sanskrit University is run in a college campus, which is a broken building. Okay, it is not a congenial place for a university to run. So the government, as a responsible government, has found out the land, and it is trying to build an infrastructure, because the university needs infrastructure, not just financial but physical infrastructure, a space to learn. So therefore, it is the continuation of the process which began a decade back, and it is going on. So therefore, that is not a legitimate argument. And third, most important point in this argumentation is that some of these groups have been claiming that we don't let the Kannadiga tax money to get invested in Sanskrit. See, I am a Kannadiga. Okay, and I have not given permission to anybody to represent me. Now, I am happy if my tax money goes to Sanskrita, not just Sanskrita, if they build good institution, not necessarily university, good institution to encourage languages, including Urdu, Persian, Arabic, all these languages has to be learned. See, what we have been trying to do is we are allowing these languages, we are actually making the Urdu as Muslim language, Persian as Muslim language, which is not the case. The languages are meant for communication to people. There is history that is associated with
That's
it.
another point being brought out, that you never saw any opposition to these Urdu universities being built, Urdu schools and colleges as well.
So, I mean, in fact, one should not, because in Karnataka, we also have Telugu schools, which is run by Karnataka state in the border. There are Tamil schools which are run, there are Marathi schools which are run, and it is the obligation and the duty of the state to ensure that people get the kind of education in their regional towns, right? Just because they are in Karnataka, they are not. But there is a consequence. See, look, we don't look at, I don't know how my tax money is being spent. It goes to the government proposes a plan, there is a debate. People's representative debate in parliament and various assemblies, and they arrive at it. I never asked whether this money goes to spend on Kannadiga language. See, if you take this, stretch it a little bit, let's say tomorrow, they say Kodavas, Havyakas, Sanketis, Korada, Chitpavani, Bari, Tuluva, Konkani. There are any number of languages. They will say, we don't want our tax money to be spent on Kannada. And second, if you say Sanskrita is an imposition, in Karnataka, all these language speakers, wouldn't they say Kannada is imposed on them? Because you want every circular of the Karnataka to be written in Kannada, all of us accept it. We would want it to happen. But tomorrow, Kodavas will say, you also bring out circular in Kodava language, Korada language, Chitpavani language, Tulu language, Konkani language. See, you don't know where are you pushing this kind of a thing. Once you wanted to run a small petty politics, for which you raise an issue, then you are actually creating havoc within the society, because Karnataka is a multilingual society. Except for few districts, most of the Kannadigas are polyglots. We speak very easily multiple languages. You know, many people who speak in the outside Kannada, in their house, their mother tongues, they're not Kannada. You know, in Sanketi house, they will be speaking Sanketi, in Korada, they call Korada, Chipavani. Chipavans will be speaking, Havyakas will be speaking Havyaka Konkanis. They will be fluently speaking Kannada and some other multiple languages along with in their house. They will be speaking Konkani language. Tulu, entire South Kerala. They switch between Kannada and Tulu so quickly. And some of us who are not native of Tulu, if I go to South Kerala, I studied there. No, I can't speak Tulu, but I easily understand what are they saying. Right. If I would have stayed a couple of years more, I would have spoken Tulu. I mean, this is the kind of interactions that we have. And to say that this is the tax of Kannadiga, what do you mean by saying that? Is it about language? We people who live inside Karnataka, we call ourselves Kannadiga. Doesn't mean that everybody in Karnataka speaks Kannada. Even if they speak Kannada, they have multiple languages with them. So you can't decide taxation and distribution of taxes, on the basis of your linguistic priority. That is not done. That is highly undemocratic way of thinking about it. Yeah. One could allege that this Kannada activism leads to majoritarian politics, linguistic majoritarianism. Right? That is what they say, democratic value, etc., minority interest. Where are they? they simply disappear in this argumentation. So this is the flawed argument. The story doesn't end it, but we will take it that as we go in this conversation further.
Right. And what we also see is that there is that sentiment of regionalism, which is very strongly present in the South. We've seen the Stop Hindi imposition protest before in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, and this seems to be an extension of what seems to be a very poor attempt at Dravidian politics.
Oh, it is. I mean, it is much larger than Dravidian politics, because this is something that in my previous videos also I had spoken here, that this is something that the gift of colonialism to us. Now they came, they tried understanding India in a particular way. As a consequence, now we have bought their story, we have shared our story, and now we are fighting amongst each other. To give you an example, now when Europeans came to India, when they were trying to look at the kind of groups that existed in Indian society, the kind of languages that they had, to make the story very short, they came with certain biblical background. They had certain understanding of this is how the world is, because their Bible and the Christian theology gave them certain ways of understanding the world, and they came. And naturally, that is the only framework that was available to them. They came and they tried understanding India in a particular way, in their experience. When, for example, William Jones and others, when they came and they tried understanding Indian languages and people, they were trying to find out whether the Indian people have their ancestry in which of the Noah's descendants, whether they were the son of the Joseph or the Ham or whatever. There are 3 sons of Noah. There is a biblical story. So there is this connection which was established in the biblical theme between, over a period of time. By around 18th century, there was a clear connection between this language, religion, nation, and ethnicity. So the assumption was the language and ethnicity travel together and they constitute the nation. And then the additional story got added up. So the Aryans, because they were finding out the homeland, the Indo-European language family, etc., were discussed at that point in time. They said these Brahmins are the people who know a little bit of Sanskrit. That was untrue. But for whatever their understanding that they had, but the Brahmins are the people who had this language Sanskrit. They had the connection of all the scriptural connection associated with Hinduism. So, and most of the scriptural writing, whatever so-called scriptural, we don't have scriptures, but they saw it as scriptures. And these were written in Sanskrit. So there is this Brahmins who are the priests of this religion, who came from outside. So this equation between the Brahmin, Sanskrita, Brahminism, and Aryans, the outside. And then the counter came to that. The counter was, there are aboriginal people. They are different kinds of people. They are not originally from India. They were Adivasi or whatever groups. They were there. And then they have various regional towns. Okay. And then they belong to different racial ethnic groups, etc. So, those are the natives. So now, the moment you see Brahmins and Brahminism and Aryans and Sanskrita as seen as outsider, as opposed to Dravidianism in South India, and the local languages, local tongue, and the lower caste people as one another group. So this upper caste always has oppressed the lower caste group. Is the kind of story for which language. So therefore, there are many scholars who would argue that Sanskrit is the language of oppression. So since Hindi is also part of the Indo-European language family, so therefore Hindi is also the upper caste North Indian oppression. Because the story was these people were chased from the North Indian lands to Southern India. So, I mean, all kinds of stories. I mean, there is no coherent story, but all kinds of story in the marketplace. So this association between language, religion, and ethnicity, and then this Aryan story comes together as one complex. As opposed to that, you have this aboriginal people, native religion, regional languages like Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, etc., etc. So this spans into multiple kinds of things. For example, Desi Marga is one little tradition and the great tradition. I mean, all kinds of things carry the tinge of these kind of ideas which emerged by the end of 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. This is the colonial Indology. I mean, it is basically a story of Indology, which has no basis. This is built out of the linguistic assumptions. No matter what amount of archaeological, genetic, whatever research you do, this problem cannot be resolved because this is nothing to do with me and you. This is something that which began. Still, this story, the foundation of the story is intact within the biblical theme, but it is sold in the secular garb. Except for that, the framework of the story has not changed over a period of 200 years, except that we add some spice over the other. This also leads to saying removing Sanskrit for Kannada language. I mean, if one looks at it. Now, how primitive the conception of language these people have is something very pitiable. But anyway, that is that. So basically, what we call as colonial consciousness. This is the idea that Europeans experienced, and the story, the way Europeans experienced and narrated about our society becomes the scientific truth and valid reasoning of our society, and they get sold as the truth of Indian society on which these movements are built. And the background of this entire movement of picking this upper caste versus lower caste, Kannada meaning lower caste, Samskrita meaning upper caste, this ridiculous kind of claim, this kind of division has some kind of currency and constituents for these identity movements to exist. So therefore, they can bring it very easy. So that's what the kind of a quick summary that I can wrap it up in a short time.
Thank you so much for putting things into perspective. And it is sad because I think even as kids, we were observing all these pro-Kannada groups come out on the front. I mean, there are genuine elements in a lot of the protests that they do, a lot of the causes that they stand for. But of course, I think it's also mixed with vested interests of late. And these Victorian values that we have inherited somehow seems to divide us by diversity rather than diversity being the unifying factor, and that's a sad reality that we have to live in. But thanks to people like you, there is awareness being spread right now about many of these subjects.
Yeah, but there is a very important additional point that I wanted to. Now, one side is this colonial story that we have. There is another story that if you try sort of knitting together the whole episode of what has happened. See, look, the Kannada University is in crisis. To be very frank with you, there was already financial crisis to invest on education sector from the beginning. All universities are running in the financial crisis. It has been more than 2-decade-old story already. But now the Kannada University crisis has become much more sharper and acute in recent days. Now, one of the issues is if you carefully notice what is happening in the last 7 months is a lot of faculty members in the Kannada University, a lot of the management committee members, which is called syndicate by law. Syndicate members are very unhappy about the mismanagement of the resources of the Kannada University. And second, those people who defend the Kannada University today with right noble intent have difficulty in person. They say, look, this is not how the university was conceptualized. It is now going in completely haywire direction. It has no vision, no focus. It has to be streamlined. Now there is a crisis in terms of there is a lot of allegation of collusion between various political groups, including the current government. There are a couple of ministers who are apparently favoring the vice chancellor. Vice chancellor apparently is coming to a terminal end. So I have not done any investigative journalism on any of this, but I keep hearing the stories from various people who are my friends who are part of the university, either in the management or in the faculty. Now, there is an extraordinary crisis, misappropriation of money, bribing, all kinds of malpractices which are there in the university. That's what people say. People have come out on ground. Now, if you want something has to happen, so you have to discipline the university, after which you can receive grants, because there is a question logically from bureaucracy which should ask. Now, if things are not correct, how should we give money? There will be objection from finance and many other reasons, and that has been a hindrance in smooth functioning of the university. Now, look at this peculiar situation. The peculiar situation is of this kind. Now, this situation has been sort of brewing for more than 6 months now. It has come to a point where now more or less people know that the existing vice chancellor, apparently a lot of people do not want it to be extended. They want a new vice chancellor to come and take over. Apparently, there are sources, there are a couple of powerful ministers who are supporting him. Apparently, he is going to be extended for some more months. So now, actually, a lot of well-wishers do not want the money to go when he is in power. Now, I don't know how much of the story is true or not. This is what I hear from people who are associated with the university. Now, one thing is clear: who is right, who is wrong, I don't know. I am not the judicial investigator to decide who is right, who is wrong. I don't have access to papers. Neither I am interested in going and investigating. But if at all we have interest in protecting Kannada University and make that university flourish for the cause of Kannada and really develop knowledge in that, then what we must do, if we are committed for cause of Kannada, we must put things in place in Kannada University, not opposing Sanskrit University.
Correct.
If you put things in place in Kannada University, build public pressure on the government to invest in Kannada, they will give. Of course, because of COVID, there is financial crunch everywhere. It is not just in India, all over the world, there is financial crunch.
The habit of mismanagement has been fairly well known in Karnataka as far as these colleges and universities are concerned.
But apparently now Kannada Hampi University has taken its peak, has reached its peak. So therefore, there are different difficulties in actually making these grants available, because there is law. In order to make these grants available, you need to keep conditions under which these grants can be, kind of disbursed to the respective institution. So instead of focusing, because you see, there is difficulty. So because a lot of people say that people do not want to go and raise issues about it because there is dominant caste equations are at play. Okay, so you see, these are petty politics. Now, what is happening? Now, in order to hide these real issues, you wanted to now pressurize BJP government, which will get scared the moment you say you're upper caste, anti-Dalit, and the moment BJP will get scared of that. And you basically forego the bribery, malpractices, whomever is responsible. I don't know who is that. Whomever is responsible, instead of cleaning the institution, you are actually hiding it. You're insulating the culprits, right? So this kind of phenomena intellectually is called alternative facts. You defend indefensible by creating alternative facts which are untrue, which have no relevance, no relationship. So in this case, the real issue is protection of certain vested interests in the university of Kannada. We must all work together to make sure that this becomes a flourishing institution. Something must be done about it administratively, in terms of vision, because it is the people's university. It is about Kannadigas. Now that is where we should be pitching in. What should we do? How do we really, bring all the culprits into the court of law? Put them in their places, make the university flourish. Instead of doing that, you wanted to protect. It looks like there are certain caste interests which are being protected, for which you wanted to hide the kind of important issues which needs to be publicly debated, and people had to be punished, whomever is involved in this kind of corruption cases.
Absolutely.
And instead of doing that, you simply raise this emotional issue. So this emotional appeal is called post-truth condition.
Right.
Okay, so you make an emotional appeal. Oh, there is something, the BJP government, upper caste, Sanskrita is happening. So this emotional furor, you try building it. And then you hide all that you want to do. So basically, this appears like a protection of pervert interests.
It's almost like there is a playbook,
It is. You go and look at last 6 months, what is happening in Kannada Hampi University, how people are responding. People are on street. I mean, the faculty are not appropriately getting salaries anymore. So people, apparently somebody had told me, some of the money for faculty itself, gets delayed because the interest rate could be used for some other activity.
Right.
I don't know how much of it is true or not. Okay, this is something that if there are people who are legitimately interested in Kannada, you want these institutions to flourish, children to get benefited out of it, knowledge to flourish in regional languages. I think we should focus on these issues, not on saying no to Sanskrita University or something like that. So
hopefully the government takes notice of this, and the suggestions will go across to them. And as a follow-up, we will try to get somebody from the government to respond to this. And these are extremely imperative perspectives I think they need to take note of. Otherwise, there's essentially no difference at all if the BJP claims itself to be a party that with a particular difference, then the politics already seems to be represented by the other parties in Karnataka. So in that sense, it's a continuation of what was already happening.
Yeah, my only desire is that irrespective of which political party comes into power, now we should not be wasting our public space, democratic spaces for all kind of non-existing, irrational issues. We should really engage in our public conversation so that we address the real problems in the society and make benefit available to everybody. Now, we need Sanskrit as a language. So there are many people who would want to say Upanishads have no language. It is about, some kind of hallucination. I mean, I have nothing to say for such people. I feel very sorry and sympathetic about them. There is nothing much. Nor I am interested in conversing with them. Sanskrita, undoubtedly, everyone knows that there is a lot of knowledge. Whomever wants, they will get. That's how Sanskrita thrives even today. People study it, dedicating it. And Kannada also we need. We also know that Sanskrit, we have borrowed a lot of things from Kannada, Sanskrita, and Kannada has given a lot of things to Sanskrita. And it has happened with multiple languages in India. And there is an absolutely harmonious way of surviving. What we must do, and the ruling dispensation must take it into account, is not to really be attentive to the noise and the pervert interest, but really actually addressing the problems of these institutions and make it meaningful and useful and produce knowledge to the society, and people find happiness out of this knowledge. It is very important because we need our literature, performing traditions. These things should flourish because these are the source of happiness for all of us. Everything cannot be bought by money. We need language, we need culture, we need traditions. So therefore, government, I hope, will take seriously, and people like you must seriously take this issue with the government.
Absolutely.
And try to
It's
find
also a very
solutions.
sensitive subject to speak on. Everybody, and especially if you're a local, if you're a Kannadiga, and if you speak about this, then you're branded anti-Kannada and whatnot, and then you're done.
Of course, yes, of course. I already carry that.
There's already a risk of that
so,
on both of us.
Yes, yeah. So.
Because I remember there was one of the particular MPs who promoted one of the local events, and he just attended where there was a billboard inside a private ceremony, and it became a big issue, and it was projected as if he was opposed to Kannada, although it had nothing to do with him or Kannada in general.
Correct. If you want to make an issue, that's why I said these are non-existing issues. And
but my last question is, we're running out of time, but my last question is, do you think people see through this, and why are they still putting up with all of these acts that they put in front of the media?
See, this is a free space. Now what they've learned, democracy, people can express their views. The story of colonial story of India. Now it does multiple things to us. One, it denies experience to us. In this case, I showed you that there is a problem, that you don't want to see the problem, but you wanted to hide it by using this argumentation as your protection and protect something. And sometimes you legitimately don't see because we have been taught, from our school days onwards, how to hate India. I mean, there is nothing to appreciate in the text that we learn. But given this, there are a lot of people are confused because not everybody is a scholar, not everybody does not have time to sit and read. And second, in order to say resist this colonial story, see, we have not got out of colonialism. Mentally, we are struck completely. Our experiences are not accessible to us. So we need a large number of people to come and talk about it, not to respond to some of these irrational arguments, but rather to build real story of what we are, how do we live, what do we want to do, how do we want to progress. This kind of culture of engagement must be there. But now there is this neat association that has been established because the ruling party happens to be BJP, and BJP has its association with RSS, and it is associated with Hindutva, Samskrita, upper caste, Aryans, and there is a counter, and the media space is more favorable to them. So they say, and there is all kind of ridiculous counter questions have been asked. So any number of issues you take, the counter questions, all kind of ridiculous. We don't allow Kannadiga tax money to be spent on such. What kind of a logic is this? But it appears very emotionally appealing. That's why.
Right.
Now, some of these intellectuals and the movement leaders are left with only emotional appeal. What they're trying to do, they aggressively. Yeah. Now, what in 2014 began as anti-Modi campaign has now turned into an aggressive, emotional, moral talk today. So everything you do, you get up, you stand up, you're morally corrupt because you're upper caste, you're low caste, you're that, this. I mean, this is the equation. And there is no other talk of thinking about a problem or anything except for moral issues. Right. Okay, there is a lot of preaching. And then this morally deciding. And so there are people who give morality certificates today. So whether you are socially just or not, whether you follow equality or not, etc. And keeping kumkuma itself is offensive.
Yeah.
Doing your traditions is an offensive today, and many people in Facebook do not say.
It's come down in college campuses as well, and it's
So wearing a thread that you use, the thread itself is a symbol of oppression.
As kids who were center right leaning, or at least you would be empathetic to certain policies of the government. I mean, you cannot blindly oppose everything that the government is doing. There has to be at least one single thing that the government may intend to do well, at least in its intent. Implementation is another thing. So if you look at it in that sense, all these liberal campuses and liberal universities would call us closet Sanghis, and that is the culture that we grew up in. So we had to be the closet Sanghis, so-called, where we cannot express ourselves because we do not agree with what the left has to say on a lot of these things.
Yeah, but there is a much larger issue. See, there are a lot of people who are nothing to do with Sangha, RSS, or any of these organizations, but they're simply part of the tradition. Now they are also getting labeled as Sanghis. And in fact, there is a fear that is being generated because, oh, you're BJP, you're Sanghi, you're anything else. You go to Ramakrishna Ashrama, you become Sanghi. You go to Chinmaya Mission, you become Sanghi. I don't know what relationship these organizations have. And there, for instance, there are many organizations which actually oppose RSS. And they are committed to their tradition. They're also Sanghi. Yeah. So this is some kind of a branding, because this is one nice, easy bracket. The moment you made Sanghi, then you're communal, fast, upper caste, Brahmanical, Aryan. I mean, all that can come. You don't need to say. Once you say one sentence, and it's easy to create a. So what they have done is a kind of terrifying fear in the environment. So this is what is created by the proponents of the freedom of speech.
Right.
Okay. So this is the kind of fear that they have generated. I think it should be broken, and it is increasing. And I'm glad, I'm happy that it is increasing, because it has come to a point where it is suffocating. So people earlier used to ignore and move away, but now it is not anymore, because
they're speaking up.
Yeah. So your very existence gets challenged. So it will break. And in fact, my thing would be they should do it more aggressive, so that it will die faster.
Right.
Okay, because people respond to it.
Correct.
Okay, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a lovely conversation every time I speak to you, and hopefully we can pick up on the subject that we just left out towards the end of the interview, and have another great session in the future.
Oh, we will come back to that. We'll definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chaitra. Namaskar.
Thank you. I'm very happy that you're taking this issue up, because this is something that requires some intervention.
ನಾವು ಕನ್ನಡಿಗರಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಈ ತರ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರೇನೆ ಅಲ್ಲ ಇರೋದು. Because I remember in one of the interviews I had given to a national news channel a few years ago, I was trying to be politically correct as a teenager, and I had no idea what happened, and I was trying to justify the violence that some of these self-proclaimed pro-Kannada organizations were doing in the name of the language. And then I realized there were a lot of reactions to that video. People actually spoke up, and they said that, do not use my language as an excuse to justify your acts of violence and whatnot. And that was the moment I realized there is a silent majority is now speaking up. We don't want to be hijacked of their agenda.
No, it is very important, but we must also make it clear that what we are speaking is not about people being committed to Kannada. In my family, my grandfathers, they were great Kannada scholars. They dedicated their life for Kannada. At the cost of their family and personal life, they worked for Kannada language. Now, that's a different way to be passionately involved in really enriching, nurturing the language. Okay, but see, the movement of this kind, identity movements that we have today, they have become really violent, and they've built a completely ridiculous kind of argument. And you are actually creating a non-existing enemy of you, and trying to create a victimhood language to talk about. And there are a lot of unethical things happening this way. Just because you see, in my house we speak Kannada, because this conversation has to happen in English, because this is a larger audience. Otherwise, we would have spoken it in Kannada. I write it in Kannada. No, we are very concerned and committed to Kannada. So equally, we are concerned about Sanskrit. And for me, given an opportunity, I would want to learn Urdu and Persian as well. And I wanted to really enjoy those. I mean, how would you miss Mirza Ghalib poetry? I mean, you would want to get it. So we don't have this, these languages are not in opposition with each other. And we have to take it appropriately. And simply some kind of ridiculous actions to be defended, and you wanted to misuse some kind of money, you can't simply bring in Sanskrit or any other language or any other institution into courtyard and then decide we will not. And you can't challenge all democratic processes like this. So this is something, because there is an act of legislation through which the Sanskrit University has come, and it has to find its place. It has happened because the people's representative participated in the debate, and the Congress government appointed two vice chancellor. We must remember that. So they recruited people there. So it has to be given appropriate place, due respect. So therefore, there is no relationship between Sanskrit University getting a campus and the Kannada University getting grants. Now, these are two different cases, and as I explained you, why there is problem with Kannada University, and it has to be addressed. Instead of fighting all this campaign, let's do a serious campaign. We will also join. Let's clean up the Kannada University. Right. Let's make it a flourishing institution. Why not? Yeah, why should we waste our energy and time like this and create disharmony among the people? So this is my deeper concern with this issue.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and concerns, and I hope a lot of our audience will be able to hear and resonate with what you say. Please do let us know what Chaitra ji has to say in the comment section below. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. See you. Dhanyawad.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyawad. Namaskar.